have to voluntarily know that, or at least have a picture, a bright picture of a future that you want, that you can see in your mind's eye. And if you can do that, then you are voluntarily choosing to at least embark on a different course, have an experiment of being alcohol-free or drug-free or addiction-free.
If you're having trouble overcoming alcohol or drugs or really any bad habit, this can go to any behavior that you want to extinguish. Look at what you're putting your focus and attention to in your life.
Thanks for tuning in to the Elevation Recovery Podcast, your hub for addiction recovery strategies, hosted by Chris Scott and Matt Finch.
Welcome everyone to the Elevation Recovery Podcast. I believe this is episode 226. I didn't look before. And my name is Matt Finch, and I'm joined here again with my co-host Chris Scott, who has been on vacation for the past week. That's when I was doing in-person interviews with my parents on different types of herbs for alcohol and drug recovery. And it's super good to see you again, Chris.
Great to see you. Yeah, back again for the first time in, I guess, like a week or a week and a half, something like that. Time's just flying. For people watching the YouTube version, you can see I haven't actually shaved since before I went on vacation. It feels nice. I've got a little caveman vibe. I got a lot of sun. Took the dogs down to Florida to a dog-friendly beach. I had to drive about 7 hours, if you take into account the stops, just to get to a somewhat ideal place where they allow dogs on the beach all the time, and in most of the restaurants and in all the places. So we had a nice little reset. And it's funny, you and I were talking before this episode about something, and as usual, we're in alignment because you brought up a topic that I had been thinking about earlier today, and I'll let you give your analogy with the stovetop burners. I'll keep that as mystique for now. But I was thinking this morning, I tend to be somewhat hard on myself in the day-to-day grind of things, or at least I lose perspective. And so going away for just several days, close to a week, not quite, allowed me to sit back and realize that for the first time in a long time, I feel like most of the various dispersed yet all important projects that are going on in my life, things with fitness and health and vitality, relationships and, close friends and family, and being able to spend time with people I care about, and, maximizing the good vibes that I like to have with people, and business and fulfillment, and you and I both get fulfillment from helping people climb out of addiction and stay out of addiction and optimize their lives and move on to new phases of life. All of those things seem to be in pretty solid places for me. And I can't say that that's been the case most of the time. We were talking about how it's so common for anyone, I think, whether or not they've had an addiction, but probably especially for people in early recovery, to feel as if one part of their life is going really well, and then other parts are total shit, and so it could be, I'm doing really well with staying away from alcohol or drugs, and my fitness is getting a little better, but the career thing's a disaster. My relationships are still a disaster. And so we have this natural, I think, instinctual capacity for focusing on things that are not doing well. So even though we're making great progress in some areas, we tend to ruminate about the things that are not going well. And that's been the case for me for years. I mean, I've had periods where everything seems to be getting a little bit better, but I'm always a little bummed out about one of those things. And for me, I guess, people have different priorities, but for me, it's been like my own fitness and health, because without that, I can't do anything. If I'm not healthy, or if I have cirrhosis or whatever, nothing else matters because I'm in trouble. And then relationships, and then fulfillment, and business, and those are kind of my priorities. And I've definitely tended to be in phases where one's doing great and the other slips. And we have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of energy each day. So it's kind of like playing whack-a-mole over time with the ones that suck, that you have to bring back into alignment with the others. And as you and I were saying also, it's common to have phases where you focus on one consciously. Like, let's say you have a business project, or when you and I were building our online courses, I'm sure neither of us got a lot of sleep. We're thinking about it all the time. We probably put on a little bit of fat, hurt our optimization. And then when you do what you and I do, you start to feel like a fraud, because you're like, I'm making this course and it's awesome, but I'm getting out of shape. Like this is shameful. I need to fix this. So then you have to focus on the fitness component, and teaching people how to do online business is never something it's not something I want to be my forte. But I think there's an art and a science to learning how to delegate things without being too distant, and so that's taken a long time. But even if I'd had one of my past careers, still, if I worked in finance, I'd still be trying to do similar things. Like, you have the art of saying no, like not taking on every single project. A lot of people I've found who have addictions, for some reason, have trouble saying no and not taking anything on. Oftentimes they're type A. Maybe they are assertive, but I, for one, felt like I had something to prove often in my finance years, which is not good when you also have an alcohol addiction, because you know that you have the potential to do all of this work, and then you take it on, and then you end up going through withdrawal or leaving to drink so that you don't go through withdrawal when you have those projects. So the work thing, which should be, at least you would have work, can go down the drain because of the addiction. So, long story short, I suppose in a nutshell, we have these priorities of our lives that are rarely in constant balance, are rarely in total alignment with each other. But it's a beautiful thing once you do climb out of addiction, and once you do develop a certain, combination of competence and familiarity and clear-mindedness with what your priorities are, that you can feel as if you are making progress in multiple things at the same time. Now, with that said, I could very well find myself in a month in a situation where maybe I take on some new projects, and you and I both know there's some exciting things we're planning to do. I could easily have a phase where I get 4 hours of sleep a night for a week or a month. I'll try not to let a month happen, but it's easy to get excited. I've been transparent about having these kind of manic phases at night sometimes where I don't really have sleep problems anymore. I sometimes take supplements for sleep, but not because I can't sleep when I go to bed, but more because I can't get myself to want to go to bed. So that's a psychological issue, a desire issue. And it's really a high quality problem, because I have a lot of great stuff going on that I want to do. So then I have to remind myself, if you want to be optimized, if you want to stay healthy, if you want that pillar to remain intact, then you need to go to bed. And so I'm like a little kid sometimes with that. I don't want to go to bed. But luckily I don't have that problem with donuts or other things. Everyone's different. So it's fairly easy for me. I don't always eat perfectly, but it's fairly easy for me to not let the diet go completely wrong. But the sleep thing is, I've learned that that's my potential Achilles heel. So I could find myself in a month where I no longer feel as if everything is in balance and growing. Obviously, we've never reached complete 100% optimization with any area of our lives, but I think it's cool for people to know that it is possible to get to a point where you do feel like you are aligned and where your priorities are all in order and manageable, and you can be proud and happy about the progress that you're making with all of them. I'd certainly never felt that way when alcohol was part of my life. And I think that at the very least, it's a prerequisite to not have addictive substances as part of your regular routine if you want to experience that.
Love it, man. Awesome. And this is coming from, I didn't invent this idea of the 4 burners, which we'll discuss now, but I learned it from an online course maybe a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. And it was by a multimillionaire that's probably worth over $100 million. And he was on his way to becoming a billionaire. And he's got a lot of great free YouTube videos too. And so when he was talking about time management, he gave this description of a stovetop with 4 burners. So if you imagine top of a stove, there's literally 4 burners, and they're all the same size. And each of those burners has up to a maximum of 25 points. So all 4 of them total, that's 100 points. And he was likening that to our lives, our 24-hour cycles. So each, everything that we think, say, and do for each 24-hour cycle, and all the values and responsibilities and projects we have, our time, focus, and energy is limited to 100 points in this example. So imagine when I was a surfer, I was getting straight A's in high school. When I was in 9th grade and when I was in 10th grade, I was a straight A student, great citizenship too, which is the, how you're behaving in class. But junior year, I got so much more into surfing than I was before. I became obsessed with surfing. The waves just happened to be really, really good for the next several years too. Just a lot of great waves. And I had a lot of friends that were surfers so then I started to ditch school. I started to not do my homework. I started to not pay attention. I started to spend most of my free time surfing or watching surfing videos or driving distances, sometimes long distances, to go surf. So before, I was spending a lot of time on school, focusing on that. I wanted to do good. So out of those 4 burners, at that point, it would be, say, school, and then I also had a part-time job, surfing, and then friends and family, I guess you could do. Well, they were pretty balanced when I was doing good in school. When I got obsessed with surfing, pretty much you could say I was addicted to it. For the next many, many, many years, that was such an obsession and a passion of mine that I wasn't able to make anything else happen in life. My credit score started to get screwed up because I wasn't paying bills on time. I was just overexerting myself often, going surfing 3 times in one day because the waves were so good. So out of all this stuff happening, a lot of things in my life were getting worse and worse and worse. But guess what, Chris? I was getting so good at surfing. I was winning contests. I was, winning national championships on the West Coast here, just crushing it. So it was really fun. When it came to addiction recovery, alcohol, and then later opioids and a lot of things in between, all the times where I was trying to quit, when I had a job, when I had other responsibilities in life, it was very, very hard to overcome addiction. Maybe I could detox, but I couldn't do the recovery steps necessary because I wasn't focusing on that burner. I didn't make addiction recovery, long-term recovery, I didn't make it like an integral part of those burners. I wanted to keep playing video games. I wanted to keep, going to parties, even though I was sober at the time. I was still hanging out with that crew. So I didn't focus and intentionally create this project of, okay, I'm going to stop hanging out with all these people. I'm going to stop eating these foods. I'm really going to recover from addiction and learn about it and see what I could do. Part of the reason was back then at the beginning, there was either no internet or there was, the internet was like the wild, wild west. There was hardly any information on there. This past time that I detoxed and quit everything, I had no job. I was unemployed. I lived with my parents who were like, super cool, natural healing folks and very spiritual and loving and compassionate. And I did have a toddler at the time. She was almost 2, Willow. Now she's huge right now. But they were helping me, no bills. They were paying the rent and room and board, food. They were helping with childcare most of the time. So for about 4 weeks straight, I had only that main 95% of my burner. I was able to put all the power on one of the burners instead of mixing up my 100 points of day of my power focus energy with work and school and raising a kid and friends and family and this and that. That was my month to turn down those things very, very low, turn career all the way off, turn school all the way off, turn childcare to a bare minimum. And I was able to crank up all that energy from those low burners and get super high focused power and energy on the addiction recovery burner. And the cool thing is I only needed to do that for a while. Then I went back to school and I was still unemployed for maybe the next 6 months. And I went to school 4 days a week. So I had a lot of free time. It was like 16 hours a week, maybe 5 hours of studying. So only 20 hours a week responsibilities. Still no room and board that I had to pay for. My parents were super cool. I think I was paying my cell phone bill. I might have had a few other tiny little bills. But then when you finally were able to quit alcohol, you had tried so many times when you worked in finance and were able to either, I don't know, maybe you quit for a day or quit, I'm going to quit. And then you quit for 12 hours, then start drinking. I did that a ton. And I think you said a previous time that you had quit hundreds of times, but then, the next weekend or the next day you'd start drinking. But then when you were able to surrender and go to your, you talked to your parents about it, and then you had accountability and support, then you went to a inpatient rehab center where you could turn the finance burner all the way down. You were separated from friends and family. You were probably separated from the gym. I'm not sure if they had a gym there. And I don't even know if you were exercising at that point in your life. You could have been. But you had all that power of all 4 burners. They all went down. So your addiction recovery focused burner, you dedicated that one to that. And you only had to do that for a period of time. So that's what I want people to understand, is that if you're having trouble overcoming alcohol or drugs or really any bad habit, this can go to any behavior that you want to extinguish. Look at what you're putting your focus and attention to in your life. Are you super busy with work or building a business, or a really, are you an executive of some kind or have lots of career? Or maybe you're unemployed, but maybe you're a housewife and you've got 4 kids to raise. So of course, these are things that can be hard to get out of. So it's really about intentionally focusing on this, looking at what's the most important thing in this phase of my life. Some people have had to quit their jobs, finally just saying, you know what, I'm never going to quit drinking, or I'm never going to quit drugs unless I quit this job. At least take some time off, or maybe work part-time, or maybe work from home when you are working there. When it comes to kids, looking at, is there a really good, safe, really amazing babysitter or nanny that would be an affordable rate that you could trade money for that service to give you more focus on addiction recovery? If there's a bunch of bad habits like TV and smartphones are 2 of the things that take up, I think in today's age, Chris, nowadays, a lot of us have come to where this was nothing in the past, but now this burner, one of our 4 burners, that's all we have is 100 points a day. A lot of people are to the point where now their biggest burner is TV and smartphones. And so it's no judgment here whatsoever. I get into that stuff too, I'm only human. These things supply huge dopamine boosts. Of course, I love my smartphone and I love our flat screen television. But right now, my life is really manageable. It's really smooth. So I don't need to crank up any particular burner, at least at this point. When it comes to recovering from an addiction, get out a pen and paper and write down operationally, not what you would like, but operationally, how are you living? Here's a good assignment if you want. There's 24 hours in every day. On your refrigerator or somewhere else, your bathroom mirror, you'll see it every day. Start measuring and tracking how much you do things like TV, eat out, cell phone, that kind of stuff. And after a few days, you'll start to panic and be like, holy shit. Oh my goodness gracious. That's why I can't get any of my internal goals that I want to do done. It's not because the intrinsic motivation isn't there. It's because your energies are scattered. Your focus and energies are scattered in so many different things. This isn't an easy process by any means, at least for most individuals, but it's a good start for people that are stuck, that are kicking the can down the road and can't seem to get lasting, permanent progress, long-term progress. This is a great tool that you now have, access to. I recommend using it.
And, one thing that occurred to me when you were talking about the burners and the levels, going up is that if you are in an active addiction, then the total burner level for you isn't 100. It's probably more like 50. It might be lower than that because your total capacity to do anything is low. I guess another way to conceptualize it would be, as you did, where you have another burner. For you, it was surfing at one point, which sounds pretty good compared to a burner that would be alcohol. In which case, that burner, your hand is on it, and the more you turn it up, the more you burn yourself. That can take all the energy, right? So without getting carried away, I tend to get carried away.
No, please get carried away.
But I think it at least makes sense that the total amount that you can turn up the dial on any of the priorities of your life will be decreased to the extent that you're engaging in addictive behavior. And the good news is you can stop, and it might help to go away for a while. But an incentive is a good incentive for people is to realize, like, hey, I'm operating at 50% or 30% or 15%. If you're like I was, when by the time I quit, I was so disoriented. I don't even remember the last conversations that I had with my boss. I can't imagine how goofy and out of it and probably insane I must have seemed to the people around me, because here I am operating at 15%. And it doesn't matter how smart or competent you are or how much experience you have, or if you're an executive or not. If you're operating at 15%, then you have major problems. But an incentive, and something I think to focus on rather than feel bad about that, is to imagine how your life could change as it goes from 15 or 30 or 50 up to 60%, 70%, 80, 90, 100. And with all of that newfound energy and mental clarity being allocated to the new priorities that you have in your life. Maybe you always thought they were priorities, but maybe not until now did you realize how little time and energy and care you'd been allocating to those particular burners. And as you alluded to, some people seem to benefit from going away. I've had private clients who did better not going away because they didn't have a very severe withdrawal, and it helped them to stay busy. They were immediately ready to start optimizing. Maybe they weren't biochemically 100%, but maybe they were 65 or 70%. They could get that up while using their work and other responsibilities to distract themselves at first. And then once they regained the ability to feel pleasure in things that did not consist of drinking, they were grateful for the ability to get a buzz from getting a workout in, or from spending time with their spouse or their kids. The things that I had a tremendous amount of guilt not being able to take pleasure seemingly in things that I knew I was supposed to take pleasure in. Now, I remember having thoughts like, am I a psychopath? Like, why is the sunrise not inspiring to me or beautiful anymore? Why did Thanksgiving dinner feel like a blur? And I don't have any particular feeling when I hang out with great friends or whatever. And of course, relationships tend to go down the drain when you're emotionally distant or numb because your mind is fixated on alcohol. So no, the answer was I wasn't a psychopath. My brain had been rerouted to focus almost exclusively on alcohol. And I'm sure you'd been there with drugs and alcohol at a certain point in your life. So for me, it was really important to go away for a little while to get complete distance from everything so that I could reset the whole system, turn all the burners off for a little bit, reset, let everything cool off so I could gain some perspective and realize that I could actually operate, however shoddily at the time it seemed, but I could actually operate without alcohol. I could breathe, I could sleep. That was a huge relief. I didn't sleep well, but I could sleep. So that was nice. We did have a little gym actually in the inpatient rehab I spent some time in. My first workouts were absolutely pathetic by my current standards, but I would go do like one set each on a machine and then 10 minutes on the elliptical at a very slow pace. And I was totally wiped. Like I'd have to take a nap after that. And so, fast forward a year later and I'm doing 10 sets of 10, like German volume training and pyramid sets with deadlifts. And I brought my deadlift, I think in the span of a year and a half, I brought my max deadlift from like 260 to close to 600 pounds. And that was just incrementally adding weights. Like every week I'd add a 5-pound plate on each side to the trap bar or the hex bar. and just keep doing it. And so over time, your capacity increases. That's actually a nice little analogy. My deadlift increased, but so did my capacity to think. So did my mental clarity. So did my capacity to have deeper bonds with my friends and my family. And so it keeps getting better and better. And I often say to people in my course, like, don't worry, it gets better, which is the opposite of the message that I heard when I was in inpatient rehab. And I've since left the 12-step or AA paradigm. That helped me for a few months. But, as with everything, I like to take things that help me and discard what doesn't. And so I really became unorthodox after a while, leaving that paradigm. By mainstream treatment standards, I guess I'd be somewhat of a heretic. But I found things that worked for me, and I realized, like, this actually does get better. I had a member of my course, longtime member. I think he's been alcohol free for at least 3 years at this point, maybe longer. He said that one of the big epiphanies he had in my course, Total Alcohol Recovery 2.0, was that you're not deprived when you quit drinking or when you quit an addiction. You're actually experiencing an update, an upgrade. Your whole life is upgraded. All of those feel-good chemicals that you've learned to rely on alcohol for, to dole out to you 20 minutes at a time, drink by drink, at the expense, obviously, of tomorrow's neurotransmitters. All of those things are already in your own brain, and it's up to you and your own imagination and your development of your personal preferences to figure out how to release them in other ways that aren't as destructive, that don't have as bad of a cost. So that cost of the quote negative consequences that people like to obsess over, I like to reframe that as a benefit, not having to have those costs. You get to live your life in a way such that it's not a catch-22, it's not a malevolent universe. And when you do that, you'll notice that your ability to have multiple priorities and things that you care about all doing better increases.
The part where you were talking about how somebody is addicted to alcohol or drugs or even both, they're 100 points per day. You were saying maybe they're down to 40 or 50 or somewhere around there, or lower or somewhere higher. And that would be, bunch of different reasons. One of them is the prefrontal cortex is disabled somewhat, depending on the person's addiction. It could be so bad that it's largely offline, and that's the executive decision-making part of the brain. Their Jing in traditional Chinese medicine, that system, their Jing, which is basically the essence, the energy that they were born with, that, as soon as it's all gone, we die. Maybe their Jing is super depleted, which alcoholism and drug addiction can do. So their prefrontal cortex is really disabled, really largely offline. And their Jing, their energy reserves, is so low that they're having to use, alcohol-induced energy or caffeine-induced energy, opioid-induced energy. All these substances used to give me energy at various times, which in turn lowered my Jing, lowered that natural energy reserves, and thereby needing more drugs. So it's like this huge vicious cycle. So another parallel in our background stories was, since our brains were operating very poorly, right? We had chronic brain dysfunction. You from alcohol, me from pretty much everything. Now, wasn't that bad. Largely opioids, benzos, and alcohol. But you went away to treatment. So number one, you got away from alcohol and the triggers and work and all that stuff, all the stressors. I was at my parents' house. So, there was alcohol everywhere around me still. Even in their apothecary, there was lots of alcohol tinctures and herbs, which in my heyday of alcoholism, I'd go down there and raid sometimes and get drunk off the herbs. And then that would have some weird side effects. So even though I was still really close to my heroin dealer and all the dealers I knew, and lots of liquor stores and alcohol and all my friends that did that shit, I was in their protective environment, but they had very healthy brains. My parents, my dad's got a genius level IQ. My mom's really smart and intuitive and creative. They both are. So now I had these fucking killer natural healers, herbologists, meditators, nutrition teachers. They were taking care of me. They were helping me strategize life and get through the day and the next week. So even though my brain and energy levels were really poor, theirs were really high. So I was leveraging that. When you went to treatment, even though they taught you an ideology and a dogma that you ended up, not integrating for permanent, you had all those other brains there teaching you skills and helping you out and assisting you, that's probably the perfect thing for you in early recovery. I mean, look at it ended to where you are right now. So at that phase of your life, that was perfect. So when people are dysfunctioning in their brains and their energies, their lifestyles, that's why I think it's so important to be able to use other brains. Your brain is one way, my brain's one way, and our intuitions and creativity. And I synergize with you regarding these topics and lots of other topics more than anyone on the planet, probably all topics. You and I just synergize. There's this natural energetic vibration thing, plus our backgrounds. Just when you come down to it, we're very similar in a lot of ways, and even how we think. So yeah, when people are not able to do it, if you come up with the list of the 4 burners and it's just seeming too hard, write down or think of who could be, and this is one of your course terminologies, Chris, who could be your confidant if you already don't have one? Who could you, confide in? Who could you have help you? Maybe it could be even, a priest at confession or something like that, or somebody online where you can do it. Let's see, where you're anonymous if you don't want anybody to know. If you get creative and if you get resourceful, there's ways to either come up with a confidant if you don't have one, or if you do have one or a few, how you can leverage them, in a way that they're going to contribute. So it's not like you're using them. They're becoming leverage in a symbiotic relationship where they get to help and contribute, which makes them feel good about themselves and gives their lives more meaning and purpose. They're also helping you, and so it's helping your life. So it's a win-win, and it's a win-win-win because you're also helping everyone else in the world just by the process of you, being on the path to living up to your potential. That raising in your vibration and that doing better has a positive effect, not just energetically, but in your interactions with people, and then in their interactions with other people. It's a beautiful thing how many people you can touch after you've been doing this. That sounded, kind of against the law right there. All the people you can touch. You know what term I mean. But anyways, now I'll shut up.
No, I think that's a great place to leave off. I think there are some rabbit holes that you and I will go down in later episodes regarding this particular topic. But I often think about how would I try to recover now in the midst of a pandemic that just keeps apparently dragging on and on and on and on. And on and on. And I ask myself, would I be able to quit without having gone away for a while? I think there are some scenarios in which I could have, for sure. Confidence would be the most important one. The first thing I did before I went away was I called my, say, 5 or 6 best friends from college and high school who I'd kept in touch with, and I told them where I was going to be, because I didn't want anyone panicking when I was going to go away for several weeks. I didn't know how long I would be away. And I realized that having those heart-to-hearts, and also it's not that common for guys in their late 20s, as I was at the time, to tell someone how much they mean to you. That was kind of a moving experience. I never would have had another opportunity to do that. And so that instantly got me confidence, because, I was kind of a little bit of a meathead / finance guy, kind of a gruff person in some ways. You're
from Jersey too, right?
And I'm from Jersey. Yeah, it's not. I'm not calling on my friends like I love you, And so this was an interesting thing. So, but I'm still in touch with all those people. With all those people I called, and so there were some parts of the inpatient rehab experience that I absolutely vehemently disagreed with and cast away. One of the first things they told me there was, you're not allowed to talk to your old friends because they're all bad influences. You're going to have new sober friends, and they're here. Yay. And I thought, come on, that's ridiculous. I've been friends with some of these people since I was in kindergarten. I'm not going to not talk to them anymore. And to be fair, that's not an AA line. That's a rehab center being extremely dogmatic, or a counselor. It's not even the center itself. I don't know if they would condone that, but we had particularly a couple very hardline counselors who would say things like that, or say things like, no more hard exercise. It's a drug. It's going to inevitably lead you back to alcohol. So I took what helped and I left what didn't. But getting confidence, knowing that I was supported by people and that it was voluntary support. I didn't call people up and say, hey, I need this right now. You need to support me. If I'd done that, I wouldn't have any confidence. So it has to be voluntary for that. They have to want to support you because of who you are or because of who they know you could be, in the same way that you need to voluntarily decide that this is what you want for yourself. The people who try to change their lives when they really don't want to change are not going to succeed. And that doesn't mean that you don't have doubts in your mind about, the trade-offs or the costs involved or the illusions of costs. I thought it was going to be a huge cost to not drink wine regularly for some reason. That was very disturbing to me. And eventually I began to shift perspective and I saw how silly that fear was. So there's room to allow your biochemistry to change, allow your belief systems to change over time. But you have to voluntarily know that, or at least have a bright picture of a future that you want, that you can see in your mind's eye. And if you can do that, then you are voluntarily choosing to at least embark on a different course, have an experiment of being alcohol-free or drug-free or addiction-free. You don't even need to swear it off forever. I used to think that you have to swear it off forever. Now I don't think that that's necessarily the case. Most people who go on this experiment, and I think the studies show this, that most people who do just go on a sort of open-ended experiment, take a break from something that has become destructive for them, or an addiction, they end up choosing voluntarily to be abstinent. And some people figure out that they can moderate, and that's fine too. I've had clients before who have, had horrible divorces or whatever, and had a period of just seemingly ridiculous substance abuse by most standards. And yet they find out that was actually just a phase for them. So you don't need to have the entire picture figured out or stress about what you're going to be doing 5 years or 10 years from now. I think it's much better and much healthier to take some time for yourself to have a reset, have an experiment, try to get your life into alignment and trust that some answers are going to come. If you voluntarily want to do that, then I think you're going to succeed.